Tell me if this exact situation sounds familiar to you. You arrive at the lake, find that beautiful, obvious clearing on the bank with a perfect fallen log in the water, and you cast your favorite lure right next to it. And then, absolutely nothing happens. Have you ever wondered why the most picture-perfect, magazine-quality fishing spots are almost always completely empty of fish? Today, I'm going to reveal an ugly truth about your favorite local lake that might hurt your pride a little bit. We are going to expose the real reason why you are getting skunked while fishing the exact same spots your grandfather swore by. If you want to know why doing everything right is actually the reason you are catching nothing, stick around. But first, I have a question for you to answer in the comments. Do you honestly believe fish are smart enough to recognize specific lures? Or are we fishermen just making up excuses for our bad days? Let me know below. To understand why we fail, we have to look at the herd mentality of the modern fisherman. This topic is incredibly important because public waters have never been under so much pressure. Millions of guys are watching the exact same tutorial videos, buying the exact same popular baits, and looking for the exact same structural features on the water. For generations, we have been taught a very specific set of rules. We are told to cast near the visible reeds, bounce a jig off the obvious rocky point, or throw a worm under the biggest dock on the lake. We do these things because they feel right, and maybe 10 years ago, they worked perfectly. But people are doing the exact same thing year after year, refusing to acknowledge that the underwater world is constantly adapting to our habits. When you repeat the same predictable motions as 1,000 other guys, you stop being a hunter and start being just another annoying splash in the water. Let us talk about that picture-perfect spot on the bank. You know exactly the one I am talking about. The grass is perfectly trampled down. There is a convenient place to put your chair. Right in front of you, about 20 yards out, there is a beautiful sunken log or a patch of lily pads. It looks like it was ripped straight out of a fishing magazine. So you bait your hook, take a deep breath of that crisp morning air, and cast right to the edge of that structure. Then you sit down, crack open a thermos of coffee, and you wait. And you wait some more. Maybe you spend 3 hours staring at a motionless line. Why does this happen? It happens because you are literally stepping into the footprints of maybe 50 other guys who stood in that exact same spot over the last 2 weeks. Every single one of them saw that exact same log. Every single one of them threw a spinnerbait, a worm, or a crankbait at that exact same angle. Do you honestly believe the fish living near that log have not learned the game by now? We often treat fish like they are completely mindless robots, just waiting for us to serve them breakfast. But they feel the pressure. They hear the heavy footsteps on the bank. They see the shadows of 20 different fishermen casting the same bright yellow lures week after week. If you cast exactly where every other person casts, you are going to get the exact same result they got. And let me tell you a secret. Most of them went home completely empty-handed. Let us dive a little deeper into the reality of heavily fished public waters. The truth is, fishing has never been more popular than it is right now. Thousands of people are hitting the local lakes and rivers every single weekend. They all watch the exact same tutorial videos online. They all buy the exact same popular baits from the local tackle shop. And because human beings are creatures of comfort, 99% of them will park their cars, walk to the closest clearing, and cast straight out into the middle. Think about your last trip to the local reservoir. You probably saw 5 other guys doing the exact same thing as you. They cast, they reel, they complain that the fish are not biting today. But the fish are absolutely still there. They did not pack their bags and move to another state. They just moved away from the danger zone. When a piece of water gets bombarded with heavy lead weights crashing into the surface every 10 minutes, the larger, smarter fish retreat. They go to places where amateur anglers are too lazy or too scared to throw their expensive lures. They hide under thick, nasty brush that looks impossible to fish. They tuck themselves under deep, muddy cutbanks where nobody even thinks to look. The common fisherman is entirely predictable. If you want to stop having those miserable days where you do not even get a single nibble, you have to break your predictable habits. You have to start looking at the water from a completely different perspective. Now I want you to imagine the underwater world from the perspective of a mature, older fish. A fish does not grow to be 10 pounds by being stupid. Surviving in the wild means learning from close calls. Imagine an old bass sitting near a popular fishing dock. Over the course of one summer, that fish might see 300 different plastic worms slowly dragged past its face. It has probably been hooked once or twice and managed to spit the hook out before being netted. That fish has learned to associate the loud splash of a heavy lure with absolute terror. It knows that a perfectly straight, unnatural line moving through the water means trouble. So, when you arrive on a beautiful Saturday morning and confidently throw your brand new lure right next to that dock, the old fish does not see a tasty meal. It sees a giant warning sign. This is what we call conditioned fish. They are heavily pressured and their survival instincts are cranked up to the absolute maximum. Yet, we stand on the shore, scratching our heads, wondering why our top-of-the-line gear is not working. We blame the weather, we blame the wind, we say the water is too cold, or the moon phase is wrong. But the brutal truth is much simpler. We are just repeating a failed process. The fish have adapted to our strategies, but we absolutely refuse to adapt to theirs. We keep stubbornly casting into the exact same high-traffic areas and expecting a totally different result. It is the definition of insanity in the fishing world. Let us talk about the typical morning routine that traps almost every single fisherman. The alarm goes off at 4 in the morning. You drink a quick cup of coffee, grab your rods, and drive through the dark to get to the lake before the sun comes up. You are excited. You feel like today is the day you are going to break your personal record. You get to the water, and what is the very first thing you do? You head straight for the spot where you caught a decent fish 3 years ago. You remember that one glorious morning, and you have been chasing that high ever since. You stand on the exact same rock, you tie on the exact same lure, and you throw it into the exact same patch of weeds. But nothing happens. The lake is completely silent except for the frogs. You tell yourself that the bite will turn on as soon as the sun hits the water. So you stay there, anchored to the past, refusing to move. 2 hours go by and your enthusiasm starts to fade. You have wasted the best part of the morning trying to force history to repeat itself. Here is a harsh reality check. Fish are constantly moving. Their location changes based on water temperature, food sources, and fishing pressure. That honey hole from 3 years ago might be completely barren right now, but your brain tricks you into staying there because it feels safe and familiar. You are letting nostalgia dictate your fishing strategy, and it is costing you the chance to find where the fish are actually feeding today. The comfort zone is the absolute biggest enemy of a successful fisherman. We all want fishing to be easy and relaxing. We want to sit in our comfortable chairs, cast out a line, and just let the magic happen. There is a reason why the easiest spots to reach by foot are always the ones with the least amount of fish. The spot right next to the parking lot is a prime example. It requires 0 effort to get there. You do not have to walk through tall grass. You do not have to fight off mosquitoes in the deep woods. You just open your trunk and start fishing. but you are sharing that exact same water with every single lazy angler who visits the lake. The fish in that area are constantly harassed. If you want to catch the fish that nobody else is catching, you have to be willing to go where nobody else is willing to go. You have to put on your heavy boots and hike around the lake to the side that has no trails. You have to deal with muddy banks, thorny bushes, and annoying spider webs. You need to look for the places that make the average guy say that it is way too much work. The moment you step out of that heavily beaten path, you are entering a whole new world. You are presenting your bait to fish that might not have seen a human being in weeks. The difference in their aggression level will absolutely shock you. They will bite out of pure instinct rather than inspecting your lure with extreme suspicion. Comfort rarely equals a heavy stringer of fish at the end of the day. Learning to read the water differently is a skill that separates the legendary old-timers from the guys who just complain on the internet. Let me give you a very real scenario. You are standing on the bank, looking at a massive, beautiful fallen oak tree stretching out into the deep water. It is a textbook spot. Naturally, you want to cast right at the end of the longest branches. You do it, and you get absolutely nothing. But while you are intensely focused on that deep water, you completely ignore the tiny, shallow mudflat just 10 feet to your left. It is barely a foot deep. It looks like a puddle. Nobody in their right mind would fish there. But what you did not notice is that the sun has been beating down on that shallow mud for 3 hours, warming the water by just 2 or 3 degrees. Small baitfish have moved into that warm puddle to feed. And right on the edge of that invisible drop-off, a massive predator is silently waiting in ambush. The average fisherman walks right past the mudflat, completely fixated on the obvious dead tree. They probably cast their shadow over the shallow water and spook the biggest fish of the day without even knowing it. You have to start noticing the subtle clues. Stop staring only at the giant, obvious pieces of structure. Start looking for slight changes in water clarity. Look for tiny current seams, where the water ripples just a little bit differently. The best fishing spots are often completely invisible to the untrained eye. We need to talk about the extreme shallows, because this is where 90% of people completely mess up their approach. Many guys have this deeply rooted belief that big fish only live in deep water. They buy heavy weights and try to launch their baits as far toward the middle of the lake as humanly possible. They cast out a country mile, let the bait sink to the bottom, and wait. Meanwhile, the most active, hungry fish are often cruising right around their ankles. Think about it from a biological standpoint. Where do the frogs jump in? Where do the small insects fall from the trees? Where do the minnows try to hide? They are all at the very edge of the water. The shoreline is an absolute buffet for predatory fish. I have seen massive fish exploding on bait just inches from the dry dirt. But most fishermen completely ignore the bank they are standing on. In fact, they walk right up to the very edge, stomping their feet, talking loudly, and casting over the fish that were feeding right there. When you approach a new spot, your first few casts should be completely parallel to the shore. Before you even walk close to the water, stand back 10 feet and cast along the edge of the grass line. Treat the bank itself as the most important piece of structure on the entire lake. Stop trying to win a casting distance competition. The guy throwing his bait 100 yards out is usually just fishing in a dead zone, while the guy pitching his bait quietly along the bank is catching giants. Let us address the nightmare that is heavy cover. I am talking about the really ugly stuff, the thick, tangled, rotten bushes, the massive piles of broken concrete, the dense floating vegetation that looks like a solid green carpet. The average fisherman takes one look at that mess and immediately says, absolutely not. They know if they cast in there, they are going to lose their favorite $10 lure. They are terrified of snagging a branch and having to break their line, so they intentionally cast 10 feet away from the cover, hoping a fish will swim out into the open water to grab their bait. But big fish do not want to swim into the open water. They feel safe deep inside the darkest, nastiest parts of that structure. It provides shade, it provides camouflage, and it gives them a perfect ambush point. If you want to catch them, you have to be willing to invade their fortress. You have to throw your bait directly into the thickest part of the bush. Yes, you will definitely get snagged sometimes. Yes, you will lose a few hooks. But you must accept that losing tackle is just the cost of doing business if you want to catch serious fish. You can tie on weedless hooks, use heavier braided line, and force your way into the jungle. The guys who consistently post pictures of massive fish are the ones who are not afraid to put their bait in highly dangerous places. Stop playing it safe in the clear, empty water. Go where the monsters actually live, even if it looks intimidating. Changing your casting angle is one of the most powerful adjustments you can make, yet almost nobody does it. Picture a beautiful fishing pier. Most people walk out to the end of the pier, face straight ahead, and cast directly outward. They fan cast a little to the left and a little to the right, but the bait is always coming back toward the pier from the exact same outward direction. The fish sitting under the pier or near the pilings see this presentation constantly. It is completely unnatural. Baitfish do not usually swim in a perfect straight line toward a giant wooden structure. They swim alongside it, or they dart diagonally across it. If you want to trigger a bite from a stubborn fish, you need to present your lure from an angle they rarely see. Instead of standing on the pier, walk down the bank about 40 yards away. Now cast parallel to the pier, bringing your lure right alongside the wooden posts. To the fish hiding under there, your bait looks like a helpless creature swimming past their home, rather than something flying directly at their face. It is a simple geometry trick. Changing the direction of your retrieve completely changes how the lure catches the sunlight. It alters the vibration patterns. It looks fresh and different. Next time you are fishing a highly pressured area, take 10 steps to the left or right. Completely alter the path of your retrieve. You will be amazed at how such a tiny physical adjustment can suddenly turn a dead zone into an active feeding frenzy. Let us talk about how you present your lure in these high-traffic areas. Most fishermen have one specific retrieve speed that they use for absolutely everything. They cast out and they turn the handle of the reel at a steady, monotonous pace. Crank, 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 all the way back to the tip of the rod. It does not matter if they are throwing a spinner or a soft plastic, they just reel it straight in. Have you ever watched a real injured baitfish in the water? It does not swim in a perfect, continuous straight line at exactly 2 miles per hour. It struggles, it darts to the side, it stops completely and sinks for a second before frantically kicking again. It looks vulnerable. When you use a robotic, steady retrieve, you are telling every fish in the area that your lure is a piece of fake plastic. To trigger a predatory instinct, you must introduce chaos into your presentation. Cast your bait out, reel it quickly for 3 turns, and then just stop. Let it fall completely motionless to the bottom. Give the rod a sharp twitch. Make that lure look like it is panicking. The majority of strikes happen during the pause, when the bait is sinking helplessly. The fish that completely ignored your steady retrieve will violently attack a bait that suddenly stops and falls in front of their face. Stop acting like a robot on the bank. You need to breathe life into your gear. Make it erratic, make it unpredictable, and make it look like an easy, struggling meal for a hungry predator. There is a deeply ingrained myth about the deepest hole in the lake. Almost every fisherman carries this belief that the biggest, oldest fish spend their entire lives sitting at the very bottom of the deepest, darkest water available. So, guys will spend thousands of dollars on fish finders just to locate a 50-foot deep crater, drop their heavy jigs straight down, and stare at their screens all day long. Now, while it is true that fish move to deeper water during extreme winter cold or the blazing heat of summer, the deep hole is often a completely sterile desert. Deep water often has lower oxygen levels. There is very little weed growth, which means there are very few small bait fish. And if there is no food, the predators have absolutely no reason to be there. Fish do not hang out in deep holes just for the sake of being deep. They follow the grocery store. I have seen anglers waste an entire beautiful spring afternoon dropping heavy baits into 30 feet of water, totally convinced a monster is hiding down there. Meanwhile, the giant fish have moved up onto a gravel flat in 6 feet of water to aggressively hunt for crawfish. You have to break the mental habit of always seeking the deepest spot on the map. Stop hunting for depth and start hunting for oxygen and food sources. A slight drop-off from 3 feet to 8 feet of water is often 1,000 times more productive than a massive plunge into the dark abyss. Stop blindly dropping into the void, hoping for a miracle. Weather patterns dictate everything in the underwater world, yet most anglers fish the exact same way regardless of what the sky is doing. Imagine waking up to a day with heavy, dark clouds and a strong, howling wind. The water is choppy and muddy. Most fair-weather fishermen will look out the window and decide to stay home on the couch. The few guys who do go out will try to find a quiet, protected cove where the wind cannot reach them. They want to be comfortable. They want to cast without the wind blowing their line around. But that protected cove is probably the worst place you could possibly fish on a windy day. Wind is the ultimate fish feeding switch. A strong breeze pushes microscopic plankton against the windy shoreline. The small baitfish follow the plankton, and the giant predators follow the baitfish. Furthermore, the choppy waves break up the light penetrating the water, which makes the big fish feel completely hidden and highly aggressive. If you want to catch fish on a windy day, you must do the exact opposite of the common fisherman. You need to march straight over to the wind-blown bank. You want the wind smashing right into your face. It is going to be difficult to cast. Your eyes will be watering. It will not be a peaceful, relaxing experience. But the water right at your feet will be absolutely packed with actively feeding fish. Do not run away from the nasty weather. Embrace the chaos of the wind, because the wind is your absolute best friend on the water. Now we must discuss the absolute goldmine of fishing, the transition zones. Most people look for uniform environments. They want a massive field of lily pads or a huge stretch of bare rocks. They find a giant weed bed and they spend 4 hours casting into the middle of it. But fish are essentially edge creatures. They do not want to be totally exposed, but they also want clear lanes to hunt. The magic happens exactly where one type of environment crashes into another. You need to look for the precise spot where the soft mud turns into hard gravel. Look for the exact line where the thick green weeds suddenly stop and give way to sandy bottom. These invisible borders are the highways of the underwater world. A smart predator will patrol the outer edge of a weed line, using the plants for cover while looking out into the clear water for a passing snack. When you find a transition zone, you have found a prime ambush point. But the casual fisherman rarely pays attention to what the bottom feels like. They cast out, drag their bait, and never notice the moment their lead weight goes from dragging in sticky mud to bouncing over hard rocks. You need to develop a sensitive feel for the bottom. When you drag a bait and feel a sudden change in texture, stop reeling. Let the bait sit right there on that border. That is the transition line, and that is exactly where the biggest fish in the lake is waiting. Pay attention to the subtle changes, because that is where the real magic happens. Let us have a serious conversation about stealth and silence. I am always amazed when I watch a group of fishermen pull up to a spot. They slam the car doors shut. They drop their heavy tackle boxes onto the wooden dock with a massive bang. They yell loudly to their buddy about getting the net ready. They walk heavily along the bank, snapping twigs and crunching rocks under their boots. And then they wonder why the water is completely dead. Water is a massive amplifier for sound and vibration. A fish has a specialized organ called a lateral line running down the side of its body. This organ detects the tiniest pressure changes and vibrations in the water from incredible distances. When you drop a metal pair of pliers on a wooden boat deck, it sounds like a gunshot underwater. By the time the loud fisherman makes his first cast, every fish within a 100-yard radius has locked down in pure panic. If you want to outsmart highly pressured fish, you have to treat your approach like a hunting mission. Park your car further away. Walk softly on the grass instead of the crunchy gravel. Speak in a quiet whisper or do not speak at all. Keep your shadow off the water. Wear clothing that blends into the background instead of a bright neon yellow shirt. Approach the bank slowly, staying low to the ground. The quieter you are, the closer the fish will stay. Silence is a devastating weapon that 99% of amateur anglers completely ignore because they treat fishing like a loud party. Sometimes the best way to do something completely different from the crowd is to severely downsize your gear. There is an obsession in the fishing community with huge lures. The old saying goes that big bait equals big fish. And while that can be true in untouched waters, it is a massive liability in highly pressured lakes. When a lake is getting pounded by dozens of guys throwing giant 6-inch crankbaits and massive noisy topwater frogs, the fish quickly learn to avoid anything large and loud. They become highly selective, feeding only on tiny insects or extremely small baitfish. When you find yourself in a situation where the fish are just bumping your large lures without actually biting, it is time to swallow your pride and go small. Take off the heavy line and tie on some ultra-thin fluorocarbon. Put away the giant hooks and tie on a tiny subtle jig or a small piece of plastic worm. It might feel silly holding a rod rigged with such delicate tackle, especially when you are hoping to catch a monster, but a giant fish will absolutely eat a tiny snack if it looks natural and non-threatening. It is like offering a potato chip to someone who says they are not hungry. They will still eat it because it requires zero effort. By dropping down to micro sizes, you are presenting something the fish have not been trained to fear. You are slipping right under their radar. Smaller gear will absolutely test your fighting skills, but it will get you bites when absolutely nothing else works. Speed is another variable that almost every fisherman gets completely wrong. We tend to fish at the speed that feels comfortable for our hands. But to trigger bites from stubborn fish, you often need to go to extreme opposites. Most guys cast out and reel in at a nice, medium walking pace. If that is what the fish see all day long, you must break the pattern. Try reeling your bait back so incredibly fast that it is almost skipping across the surface. Make it look like a terrified baitfish running for its life. A predator might strike simply out of pure reaction, because they do not have time to inspect the bait. If the blindingly fast retrieve does not work, you must go to the absolute extreme opposite. I am talking about agonizingly slow. Cast your bait out, let it hit the bottom, and then do practically nothing. Drag it 1 inch forward. Wait a full 30 seconds. Drag it another inch. It requires a tremendous amount of patience. Most fishermen cannot stand fishing this slowly because their brains need constant action. They get bored after 1 minute and start reeling. But in cold water or during a cold front, a fish is not going to chase down a fast-moving meal. They want an easy target that sits right in front of their nose. By slowing down to a crawl, you are keeping your bait in the strike zone 10 times longer than the guy next to you. Master the extremely fast retrieve and the painfully slow crawl. Leave the comfortable medium speed to the guys who enjoy not catching anything. Have you ever heard of the second cast theory? It is a fascinating concept that exposes a massive flaw in how most people fish. Here is the scenario. A guy makes a perfect cast right next to a beautiful submerged stump. He works his bait flawlessly past the wood. No bite. He immediately assumes no fish are home, so he turns his body and makes his next cast 30 yards down the bank in a totally different direction. This is a huge mistake. Many predators are highly curious, but also extremely cautious. When your first cast went past that stump, a big fish might have noticed it. They might have even followed it for 10 feet, staring at it, trying to decide if it was real. But before they could make up their mind, the bait was gone. When the angler moves on, he leaves an interested, activated fish behind. When you make a cast to a high percentage target, do not just hit it once and walk away. Throw your bait to the exact same spot a second time. Sometimes it takes that second presentation to push an interested fish into a highly aggressive state. The first cast gets their attention, and the second cast triggers the ambush instinct. I have personally caught some of my biggest fish on the third or even fourth cast to the exact same rock. The fish was just sitting there, getting more and more annoyed with each pass, until it finally snapped and attacked. Do not be in such a rush to cover water that you leave active fish behind. A good piece of structure deserves more than just one quick glance. Let us step into the dark and talk about night fishing, the ultimate way to escape the crowd and change your results. During a busy summer weekend, the lake is a chaotic nightmare. You have jet skis roaring past, you have loud boats blasting music, you have 50 fishermen stomping along the bank. The fish are totally stressed out and pushed deep into heavy cover. But when the sun goes down, the entire world changes. The annoying boats go home, the loud people leave, the lake becomes completely silent and still. Under the cover of darkness, those massive fish that hid all day finally feel safe. They move out of their deep hiding spots and cruise right up into the extreme shallows to hunt violently. Night fishing is an entirely different game. You do not need to cast a mile. You do not need to worry about your line being invisible. You use dark-colored baits that create a strong silhouette against the moonlit sky, and you use baits that make a ton of noise. A slow, steady, plopping sound moving across the pitch-black surface will draw explosive, heart-stopping strikes. The average fisherman refuses to fish in the dark. They are scared of the dark, or they just want to be home watching television. By simply shifting your schedule to the late-night hours, you are eliminating 99% of your competition. You are presenting your lures to fish that are relaxed, aggressively hunting, and completely unafraid. It is the easiest way to stack the odds heavily in your favor. I need to address a harsh truth about tackle anxiety. A huge reason why fishermen do exactly what everyone else does is because they are deeply terrified of losing their gear. I see guys buy a $20 crankbait and they treat it like a rare museum piece. They only cast it in completely open water, where there is absolutely zero risk of snagging a rock or a log. They refuse to throw it near the bridge pilings or the sunken trees. Think about how ridiculous that is. You bought a tool specifically designed to catch fish, but you are intentionally keeping it away from the exact places where the fish actually live. The fishermen who consistently catch the most impressive stringers of fish are the ones who view tackle as disposable ammunition. They know that to get the bite, they have to bounce their lure aggressively off the rocks. They have to crash it into the submerged wood. This erratic bouncing action is exactly what triggers a reaction strike from a predator. Yes, this aggressive style means you will occasionally jam your hook deep into a sunken log and have to break the line. You will lose some expensive baits. It hurts your wallet for a brief second. But the reward is pulling a monster fish out of a spot that everyone else was too afraid to cast near. You have to overcome your tackle anxiety. Stop fishing like you are trying to protect an investment. If you are not occasionally getting snagged and losing a lure, you are simply not fishing close enough to the right structure. The final and most crucial step in breaking out of the crowd is learning to trust your own absolute instincts over the old tales. Every town has a local fishing legend, a story passed down about how you absolutely must use a specific green worm near the old dam if you want to catch anything. You go to the local bait shop, and the guy behind the counter tells you exactly where to go and what to use. So you buy it, and you go join the line of 5 other guys doing the exact same thing. Stop listening to the echo chamber. Those old tales were probably true 10 years ago, but lakes change, fish populations shift, and fishing pressure ruins old hotspots. Be a pioneer on your own local water. If your gut tells you to throw a bright pink bait in a spot where everyone else insists on throwing natural brown, do it. If you look at a weird, ugly patch of mud and feel like a fish might be there, cast at it. Stop caring if the guy fishing 50 yards away thinks your technique looks weird. The greatest discoveries in fishing are made by people who are willing to look foolish for a few hours. When you stop mimicking the guy next to you and start experimenting with weird angles, unusual speeds, and neglected spots, you stop being just another person holding a stick. You become a hunter. You start reading the water on your own terms. And that is the exact moment when you go from being a guy hoping for a lucky bite to an angler who expects to catch fish every single time you hit the water. So let us put all the pieces together and look at the big picture. The biggest, most unexpected twist in the world of fishing is that the most beautiful, obvious, textbook spot on the lake is usually the absolute worst place you can possibly put your bait. The fish have learned our habits, they know our tricks, they know the sound of our footsteps on the bank. If you walk away with just one lesson today, let it be this: doing what every other fisherman does guarantees you will get the exact same frustrating results they get. You have to break the cycle. Abandon your comfort zone. Go to the ugly, muddy corners of the lake. Throw your bait into the thickest, nastiest cover you can find. Change your angles, speed up, slow down to a crawl, and stop being afraid of losing a few hooks in the brush. When you start fishing where others will not, you will start catching what others cannot. Thank you so much for hanging out and watching today. If this video made you rethink your approach to your local lake, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Now, I want to hear from you. Head down to the comments and tell me, what is the most unusual or ridiculous spot where you have ever caught a massive fish? Drop your stories below, let us get a great discussion going, and I will see you all on the water next time.